Thank you, Peter. And I have to say that it is such a thrill to be part of this inaugural event because we've been working on it for quite a while. Peter has had this idea for probably a decade. And every step of the way, we got closer and closer and closer. And some of you might be saying, 1 million people, that's a lot of people to inspire. Yet with our next speaker, he really needs no introduction, but I will introduce Dr. John McDougall, who is just a world-renowned expert on plant-based health. And when I told my mother-in-law that Dr. John McDougall was speaking at this event, she goes, "You got Dr. John McDougall?" My sister, when she was in her 80s, followed his protocol, and it turned her life around. And that's all the introduction he needs. He turns lives around. And he's the author of many best-selling books. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the amazing Dr. John McDougall. Please give a hand for Dr. McDougall.
Well, thank you very much for the nice introduction. My name is John McDougall. I've been at this for more than half a century. And what I'm going to share with you is the most unpopular topic that I could think of, but it's the most important one. So hopefully you'll bear with me. I mean, I could have talked to you about the way I treat breast cancer, diabetes. We cure 100% of type 2 diabetics. I could have talked to you about autoimmune diseases or high blood pressure or heart disease. You know, all those topics, by the way, if you're interested in them, you can find them on YouTube. You just put in the name McDougall, and whatever you're interested in, you'll find one lecture or another that I've given. But instead, I decided I needed to talk to you about something that's so near and dear to my heart. Something that I think about every day. I think about, you know, maybe too often, but it's really essential. You know, it's essential because everything depends upon what I'm going to talk to you about over the next few minutes. I gave this presentation the first time at the American College of Lifestyle Medicine in October of 2019. And when I finished the presentation, I got a couple of standing ovations. And these people, they liked it. The American College of Lifestyle Medicine, these are doctors. There's 500 physicians, dietitians, other ancillary people involved in nutrition. They knew about a vegan diet. And they really, they enjoyed the initial presentation, but there was no follow-up. And probably the most important thing that happened to me during this presentation is, as I finished and as I was leaving the stage, a young doctor came up to me who was there to take his boards, you know, his tests for certification for the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And he said to me, he said, "Dr. McDougall, why am I here? You know, why am I taking the certification tests? How do you practice medicine on a dead planet?" So, you know, if you don't find the topic that I am presenting to you today all that interesting, because you'd like to talk about diabetes or high blood pressure or probably weight loss, do understand that this is the most important thing. Whatever you do, my question to you is, how do you do it on a dead planet? All right. Anyway, I got started in medicine, 1965. And that's when I went to actually undergraduate. 68, I went to medical school. Probably the next biggest event in my life was when I met my lifelong partner, Mary. And that was in 1971. 1972, we went to Hawaii and I did my internship. And the next year, 1973, I learned pretty much everything I know about medicine today. I became a sugar plantation doctor on the Big Island of Hawaii. What that meant is I took care of 5,000 people who worked on a sugar plantation. I learned a couple of things there. I learned one, most importantly, I learned what a terrible doctor I was. My patients didn't get better, although I knew they should. I mean, I was raised in an era where we saw Marcus Welby, Dr. Kildare, and Ben Casey, and they had miracles, but I didn't have miracles in my practice, not when it came to chronic disease. And we're going to talk about chronic disease in a bit. You know, chronic high blood pressure, chronic diabetes, chronic heart trouble, chronic cancers. Yeah, they never seemed to get better. And I thought it was my problem. And the second thing I learned is what people should eat And I was, an enthusiastic meat and dairy drinker. But I learned from my patients, because they were first, second, third, and fourth generation, I learned a different style of eating. My first generation people, they were raised in Korea, China, Japan, the Philippines. And they learned a diet of rice and vegetables. And they moved to the big island of Hawaii, and they kept their diet. Sure they did. But their kids were influenced by the Western diet, and their grandkids were fully Westernized. And right before my eyes, I saw them change from trim, healthy, disease-free people to obese, sickly, American-style people right there. Why? Because they changed their diet. Yeah. Well, anyway, I became a board-certified internist. I've been practicing this kind of medicine for 46 years. It's called diet therapy. Diet therapy. Let's see if I can get you onto some slides I put together for you. Oh, okay. So, it's nice that I'm talking to a could-be, would-be vegan group. At least I hope you're all in that right direction. I bet a few of you got dragged to this conference kicking and screaming. But I bet by the end of the conference, you're going to be so thankful for that person who brought you to this new information. And I realize it's overwhelming. It's threatening. It's a big deal. I mean, it's like worse than religion and politics to talk about food. And those topics are really tough to deal with, especially these days. So you're here, you're stuck in that seat, and hopefully you'll open your eyes and your ears and you'll listen to what I have to say. This is the presentation that I first gave. This was in October of 2019, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. They honored me. They gave me a Lifestyle Achievement Award. Only 4 of them have been given in the entire history of this college. And my colleagues gave me the honor of a Lifestyle Achievement Award. And I certainly have worked hard at it. I don't know that I deserve that kind of honor, but I certainly put in the work. What we're going to be talking about is a common denominator, and that's food. That food is the common denominator in 3 of our most pressing issues, the things that need to be dealt with in the 21st century. And they are COVID-19. We don't call it COVID-19 anymore, do we? You call it a new virus, a new variant, because there's a new one right around the corner all the time. And it doesn't make any difference how many vaccinations you get. And I do believe in vaccinations, but it doesn't matter, because there's going to be a new variant out there that's going to get you. And what you're going to understand when I get done with this presentation is that the only way you can really protect yourself permanently is to change what you eat. But we're going to talk about another set of diseases that I spent 46 years treating. In fact, I still do. I'm still an active practicing doctor. I've taken care of more than 12,000 patients. Personally, what a privilege, huh? And I still do that. I do it by internet these days. We run a telemedicine program, a 12-day program where people from all around the world join us, and we offer them medical care and just a tremendous amount of support. And they change. And you'll find out a little bit more about that at my website, which is drmcdougall.com. But chronic diseases, which is probably 90% of the illnesses that your friends and relatives suffer from, the common denominator is food. And then, what inspired me to put this lecture together, and all I can think about these days, is climate change. Why? Because it's happening. You know that it's happening. There are no more climate deniers out there, are there? Good grief. You guys are archaic if you are. I mean, you don't even deserve a listen. Climate change is here. And let me give you some data. Just again, it might wake you up a little bit. Is we have until 2030 before it becomes irreversible. That's 8 years. And we got until 2050 before life exists on this planet, before it's all gone. Yeah, you know what? That's not very long, 2050. So hopefully, I've got you awake, you're paying attention, and we're going to do this together because, I've got to raise an army. I've got to get you out in the streets protesting. I'm from the Vietnam era. We used to get in the streets and we used to burn our draft cards. Where are the youth today? Where are the grandparents marching alongside of the youth? Why? I don't understand why we're so. Anyway, all right. Diet is the common denominator between chronic disease, climate change, and infectious disease. But there are all kinds of things involved. When I talk about these subjects, realize I'm talking about the animals suffering. I'm talking about people suffering. I'm talking about loss of habitat for animals. I'm talking about your religious faith. I'm talking about your personal appearance and your money. So there are all kinds of issues that are attached to these three topics. Understand. But I want to talk about the major issues here. Let's talk about chronic disease. Chronic disease. All right, chronic disease. That means it's here for a long time, right? It means it never gets better. It's chronic. If it was an acute problem, you'd get over it. This is chronic disease. Chronic disease is due to food poisoning. I've tried to make it as simple as possible for people to understand. They understand tobacco poisoning, and they understand alcohol poisoning, and heroin poisoning, and cocaine poisoning. They understand that. And so that, you could just take one action and you could stop the poison. So I've tried to make the food thing as simple. So you can take the minimal amount of actions to get the results that you're looking for. And believe me, you want to learn more about this, then you just have to follow me around on YouTube or the internet or at our website. And I've spent 46 years doing this, lectures, books, etc. But I'm going to minimize this discussion today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about food poisoning, but not much. These are the food poisons. They're animal foods, whether they be parts of animals or secretions from animals, and also oil. And I bet oil is a big topic for many of you. You've made the switch to a vegan diet, and that's good. That's good, but you're still overweight. You still are promoting cancer and heart disease and bleeding and all, suppressing your immune system because you haven't given up the oil. And it's just as toxic as the animal foods as far as preventing you from enjoying the health that you should and could. Yeah, you've dealt with the animal rights issues and, no more cruelty in animals. That's good. And you probably dealt with the planetary issues. But hey, you need to be a good ambassador when it comes to spreading the messages of animal cruelty and climate change and in our environment. You need to be a good messenger. And I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, if you stand in front of a crowd and you appear overweight and sickly, they're not going to listen to you. They're going to say, if I have to end up with the health that you have to save the planet and the animals, forget it. So I know you've got your attention. I know you want to be a good messenger because I know you have causes and they're really important. They're important to me. All these things. But there's a problem that's prevented you from conveying these important messages, and that's the way you look in your personal health. Not all of you, but you know who I'm talking about. All right, diseases of food poisoning, there are obesity and its complications like diabetes, cancer, heart disease. The diabetes of both type 1 and type 2, but I'm only talking about type 2 diabetes, which is 100% curable with a change in diet and associated weight loss. Heart disease, all kinds of artery problems. You got 60,000 miles of arteries or blood vessels in your body, and they get affected in different parts of the body. You lose your hearing, you lose your sight, you develop erectile dysfunction, get gangrene, heart attacks, strokes, every place. Food poisoning, various kinds of arthritis, non-specific arthritis, rheumatoid, lupus, ankylosing spondylitis, psoriatic. Various kinds of cancer like colon, breast, prostate. These are due to food poisoning. And by the way, even after you get the cancer, you can make a difference. in not only just the quality of somebody's life, but the quantity. And so says the American Cancer Society in February of 2015. They came out and told my colleagues that they should be treating their patients with diet information, the kind of diet we're talking about today, at least in this direction. This is official. People who have cancer need to be healthy. They'll live longer and they'll live better, no question about it. Upper intestinal problems, what would you think caused your stomach to hurt, your esophagus to hurt, GERD, indigestion? No, it's not a lack of Nexium or Prilosec. No, that's not a deficiency you got. It's what you put in your stomach, of course. And most of us are familiar with this kind of a problem, and we know where it comes from. It's the food. So the solution is quite simple. It's a starch-based diet with the addition of fruits and vegetables. I just want to take a moment here and tell you about why I talk about diet in a certain way. A plant food-based diet, a vegan diet, or a vegetarian diet can be so many different things. Vegetarian can be with cheese and eggs. You can be just as sick with cheese and eggs. Vegan can be loaded with oil, and I talked to you a little bit about oils. Or it could be a lot of refined foods. Or you could be eating a whole food, plant food-based diet where everything is whole, everything's green, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you call it nutrient dense, and you're starving to death eating all this broccoli, cauliflower, kale, and lettuce. Just doesn't work, folks. You can't get satisfied. No population of people has ever eaten such a diet. You must eat a starch-based diet because all populations that ever walked this earth did so. I mean, think about it. Native Americans, I can show you studies where Native Americans were found 10, 12,000 years ago to be living on potatoes and then corn. And if you go a little further south, you go to Mexico and Central America, what you find the Aztecs and the Mayans. What are they called? What are they referred to? Those called the people of the corn. Go a little further south. Let's talk about the Incas in the Andes. I mean, there's a potato-eating population of people, and they ate potatoes until they went to war. And then they switched to quinoa because potatoes are pretty heavy to carry. So let's go over to Europe, and let's talk about the breadbasket of the world, which they call Ukraine now. But, it used to be focused on Iraq, Iran, Egypt. The bread, that's like bread. The breadbasket of the world, the staff of life. Anyway, go a little further. Go a little further. Let's go to Asia. If I talk about people from Asia, China, Japan, Korea, you know what you think about. You know what their food is. Before 1980, 90% of the diet of a typical Asian was rice. Yeah, it was white rice. White rice is not a deal breaker. It really isn't. It's not as good as brown rice, and we promote whole foods. Believe it, we do. But let's get real. I mean, let's make the difference. You are a starch eater. Until you figure that out, you won't have control. It won't be something that you can teach or live. How much of your food should come from starch? Well, let's just say 90%. When you look at your plate, you don't need a dietitian, you don't need a dietetic handbook. What you need to do is just look at your plate. Is 90% of the food beans, corn, potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, wheat? Okay, the other 10%, what do you make that out of? Okay, these nutrient-dense foods, like cabbage. You want to make a diet of cabbage? I got to eat between 11 and 22 pounds of cabbage to get my calories for the day. I don't have time. My stomach wouldn't tolerate it. Forget it. Get off. Well, not completely off, but don't focus on these nutrient-dense foods. You need to focus on starch. Everybody has. That's the diet of the human being. I call it a traditional diet these days because I don't want to scare people with the word vegan. And I certainly wouldn't want to embarrass myself by calling it the McDougall diet. So I call it traditional diet, like your ancestors did. I mean, look at the Latino population. We're talking about beans and rice and corn and squash. Look about your friends that are of Asian descent. Their mothers, their fathers, their grandparents, what do they live on? Rice. Let's get some ethnic pride in here. I've published 3 major studies, which are available to you. They're uncontested about our program. I didn't publish all of them. I mean, this one I published and funded it. We studied over a 10-year period of time, 1,703 of our patients. Nobody was excluded. It was over a 7-day period. Now, think about this, 7 days. This is what happened to people who came to my clinic. I used to run my clinic at St. Helena Hospital. I did that for 16 years. One of the most respected hospitals in California. And then I moved it to a resort where I ran it for 18 years. And thanks to COVID-19, we switched to a telemedicine program. I mean, the reason I have a chance to talk to you today is because of the world of the internet. And it's a different kind of communication than if I was there on stage, which would be nice. But I don't think it would be the same. And it wouldn't be in some ways, it wouldn't be as personal as we have right now. Right now, we have a chance to kind of, be together in a way that you can't do if I'm standing 100 feet away from you on stage. So let's take advantage of this. And anyway, that's what we do with our 12-day program now, is we take care of people from Singapore and Sydney and London, et cetera, and all around the world. Well, let's talk about the results of the 1 week, 7 days. This is what happens to people. The average weight loss is 3.1 pounds, eating as much food as they want. It's really good food too. They love it. And the average drop in cholesterol is 22 points. You can't get that with statin drugs. The average drop in blood pressure is 18 over 11 millimeters of mercury, and that's with people who have high blood pressure. And we are able to get 90% of people to reduce or stop their medications, particularly blood pressure and diabetic pills. Sick people take drugs. Sick people end up going to surgery often. My goal is to get you out of the medical business, and we do. Oregon Health and Science University, that's the medical school in Portland, they independently studied my program over a year. These are 1-year results. What they found is the average weight loss 1 year. And these are people who weren't interested in weight loss. They were interested in multiple sclerosis. Over 1 year, they all lost almost 20 pounds. And they maintained a weight loss of 20 pounds. Cholesterol reduction was about 20 points. Reduction in insulin and fatigue, which is a major problem with MS. And this was really shocking to them, not to me, because I know what people do. I mean, I like I say, I've touched 12,000 of them. Really shocking was the finding that 85% of people were compliant with the program for 12 months. Why'd they stick with it? You can't get half the people to take the drugs you prescribe. Why'd they stick with it? Because the results are so tremendous. Not just with the multiple sclerosis, but all the other problems, the weight loss, the bowel movements, et cetera. So the compliance rate is 85% at the end of a year. You'll never match that with any other program. And then independently, this was in New Zealand, a couple of doctors studied my program in a community-based setting. And they got a similar results. In fact, they bragged that they have the best weight losses of anybody in the world. They got a 25-pound weight loss over a year. Yeah, that's better than ours, but they used our program. Cholesterol reduction was similar to ours, 20 points, and similar compliance rate, and you'll get the same thing. I heard that you folks, many of you are interested in teaching. I strongly encourage you to. There's nothing more rewarding than helping other people. We actually have a course you can get certified. It's the Starch Solution Certification course, where we certify, we give you a test, we certify that you know the starch solution. And you can display that in your window, that you understand the starch solution, which is a worldwide bestseller book that I published in 2011. You'll find it every place. The Starch Solution. Why'd I call it starch? I mean, John, why would you do that? You're just cutting off your nose to spite your face to use the word starch. Well, I was right. All right, the way the program works is very simple, is you stop the injury and the body heals. The body is always healing. It never stops. Even if you got cancer, it never stops. Like, for example, when you smoke cigarettes, you injure yourself 20, 40 times a day. You cough, mucus comes out of your lungs. What happens when you stop the injury? The healing catches up with the damage and you heal. That's all. The healing's always been going on. It's just that it can't keep pace with the injury. That's it. Just stop the injury. And in the case of food, we've got to stop the food poisons. That's all. Just stop the food poisons. All right, let's talk about climate change, which is really, really what I want to get across the message. But as I say, the topic of climate change, once people hear that that's what you're going to talk about, they tune out. I don't know, maybe they're just too scared. For whatever reason, the world is not paying the attention that they need to on this very important topic. So I hope that I get your attention. Nudge the person that's sitting next to you, wake them up. This is important. I learned about climate change from Al Gore in 2006, Inconvenient Truth. But he forgot to mention food. Maybe that was because he was a black Angus farmer. Maybe that was because he ate the rich Western diet himself. And then he wrote the sequel in 2017. Again, he told us about fossil fuels and how urgent it was. Very important messages, but he didn't mention food. Then we had in 2006, we had the United Nations, or the Food and Agriculture Organization report, FAO report, supported by the World Bank. And they came out and it was shocking. I know many of you know the statistics and you should know it. And that is that 18% of the greenhouse gases are caused by the animal agricultural businesses, more than all transportation put together. But those data, they didn't connect it. The FAO really didn't mention food, or didn't mention what we ought to do. They mentioned food was the problem, but they didn't tell you what to do. They didn't even give you one recipe. So in 2006, when I first got interested in this topic, and in fact, I got interested 2 years before. When I got really interested was when I had my first grandchild, who's now 18 years old. Then my focus of attention changed. And many of you have children and grandchildren. They have no future unless we get this fixed quick. And so I wrote an Inconvenient Truth. We are eating our planet to death in the year 2006. And I used to do weekends, they're called advanced study weekends. I brought a lot of people. I always had somebody who dealt with the climate, often had people who dealt with animal rights. And I knew I turned off some folks by doing that, but it was important that people started thinking about these topics. And I had Robert Goodland, who was in charge of the World Environmental Food topics. He was the environmental advisor for the World Food Banks the World Banks for 23 years. And he came and talked in 2013 to our group, and he explained to us that we had 3 years left. That was in 2013. But he also talked about his important work at the World Watch Institute, where they took the FAO report and they recalculated the real damage from animal agriculture and added things that really needed to be added and accounted for things that really needed to be accounted for. And to this day, these figures stand, and that is that over 51% of the global warming gases are caused by animal agriculture, but they still didn't mention how to fix it. They didn't give you one recipe. They didn't really tell you what to do. It's nice they told us what the problem was. And now we have the EAT-Lancet Commission. The EAT-Lancet Commission is the most important authority on diet and climate. They're the ones that the IPCC listens to, and they're the top people in the world. And they tell you that, look, they said in 2019 that we've got fewer than 12 years left. Excuse me, I'm being generous. I'm telling you, we have until 2030 before we have irreversible changes, but every day counts. Every second they're equivalent to 7 Hiroshima bombs hitting the planet every second from the heat that is caused by the excessive sunshine. Time to act, don't you think, folks? Time to act. Anyway, they told us eat more vegetables, grains, legumes, etc. They got it right, but they got it wrong. And when you read my website, which is totally dedicated to this topic, and I encourage you to go there. I'll give you the website a couple of times, but it's supported by my foundation, the McDougall Research and Education Foundation. It is www.mcdougallfoundation.org. Yeah, and it goes into greater detail, all the topics. It's totally dedicated to climate. And importantly, at this website, there are 8 studies that I present to you, and there are no contradictory studies that show that if you will change to a vegan diet from the Western diet, you could reduce your CO2 output by as much as 80% overnight. Yeah, what a tool. And you can take these 8 studies, you can show them to environmentalists, you can show them to your mother-in-law, you can show them to anybody. They're there on the website, McDougallfoundation.org. Anyway, they still don't talk about what you ought to do. And that's where you folks come in. You want to teach, you need to teach people how to do the diet. Take them to your kitchen, show them the recipe, show them how good the food tastes. Nobody's doing that. You have a really big job ahead of you. Anyway, we're focused on what the problem is. The problem is animals. We've got to stop eating the animals. It makes no sense at all. Makes us sick, sets us up for infections, destroys the planet. There's no disagreement on this, but there's no action either. So here's one of the studies showing a reduction of greenhouse, a 70 to 80% reduction in greenhouse gas production when you change your diet. Overnight, you could do this. And here's another one of them. This was out of the Lancet Commission. It shows a 50% reduction. You probably can play this tape later on, or you can go to the website, McDougallfoundation.org, and you can get these studies. Okay, so how does this work? Well, remember I told you that for 46 years, I've been practicing diet therapy. And my patients get well because the body is always trying to heal. Well, the planet is always trying to heal too. We just got to stop the repetitive injury. Yeah, we got to stop that. Yes, but I'm going to talk to you about a very potent way to intervene too along the way. We got to do that too. Stop the injury. All right, let's talk about infectious disease. Everybody's over COVID, but COVID's not over with us. Where I live, they talk about an increased risk of infection, hospitalization, and death. Still happening. Not going to stop, by the way. Why? Because the source of these viruses, it's due to a hot planet where these organisms can spread all over the planet. You need to protect yourself. And how do you protect yourself? Well, I know many of you are anti-vaccination. I'm a real doctor. I'm not. Okay? Whatever. But whether you're anti-vax or you're pro-vax doesn't make any difference. You still need to make your body as tough as possible so you resist these infections. So before COVID-19 even came to this country, United States, China, they knew that whether you ended up hospitalized on a mechanical ventilator, drowning for 2 weeks on a mechanical ventilator, or dead, depended upon your previous health, your comorbid factors. Your chronic diseases, the one we talked about a few minutes ago, the ones that we talked about were due to diet that are cured by diet. High blood pressure, kidney failure, heart disease, obesity. If you watch your news reports, you see when they take you into the intensive care unit, the person connected to the ventilator is a big person. And I don't mean tall. They knew that. We know this in this country too. We knew that the CDC told us that if you have comorbid factors, the obesity, the high blood pressure, the heart disease, that your risk of hospitalizations is 6 times higher, your risk of dying is 12 times higher than those of us who are healthy. And even in Europe, they've come to this conclusion. This is the British Journal. It tells us we need to eat diets richer in whole grains, fruits. Why not go all the way? I mean, why just richer? Why not just do 100%? I think so. Everybody knows this. And how does the diet work? Well, all kinds of ways. Strengthens the immune system, changes the microbiome, which is the bacteria that everybody's talking about. Puts up barriers that prevent the viruses from coming into the body. All kinds of phytochemicals in plants. Yeah, plants, phyto. Only plants have these chemicals, phytochemicals, that are anti-infective. One of the more interesting mechanisms involved, I just want to touch on for a second because it's one that people can relate to. Doctors can relate to this too. It has to do with cholesterol. Cholesterol, it gets involved with the transport areas of the cell lining, the lining between the blood and the lungs. It's a one cell layer. Okay, these are bridges. These are called CoV2. Okay, these are bridges, and if you add cholesterol to the system, in other words, you eat a high cholesterol diet, and you all know that cholesterol only comes to you in the form of animal foods. Plants don't contain any significant amount of cholesterol. So what happens is the cholesterol builds up in your body. It gets involved with these bridges, and it opens them wide and creates more bridges, and therefore you end up getting infected deeply. And in our program, I told you, we reduce cholesterol. Here's 7 days, a reduction in cholesterol, 22 points. I talk to a lot of doctors, and we doctors, we learn about drugs and we relate to drugs. And so anytime you can talk about drugs, doctors understand. Talk about food, don't understand very much about food, but drugs we understand about. And the statistics that say that if you give statin drugs to people, they have a reduced risk of fatal or severe disease. And the mechanism is cholesterol again. All right, so I've got this established for you. We talked about chronic disease. We talked about climate change. We talked about the infection issues, the major things affecting us over the next, however long that we exist on this planet. Your next question is, will we do it? Will we make the changes? Are human beings capable of doing this? Well, let's go to lessons from the past and see. During World War I, 1914 to 1918, the British set up a blockade so that they could starve the Germans. And if you see the North Sea here, you see that Denmark was involved in this blockade. They were under severe restrictions of food, and they were at risk of starving. And the Germans, they did starve. 400,000 Germans suffered from malnutrition and starved to death during World War I because they kept with the basic philosophy of a well-balanced diet. They made sure everybody had plenty of meat and dairy. 400,000 Germans died during this period of time due to malnutrition. But not the Danes. Not the Danes. What the Danes do? Well, they listened to Mikhail Hennedy. He was a famous nutritionist at that time who had made a very important statement. That is, the need for protein in the human being is so low that it shouldn't be counted in any consideration, any recommendation. We just could never become protein deficient. It's impossible. But you wouldn't know that going to the supermarket, listening to the advertisements, would you? You'd think protein was the most important nutrient out there. Oh, well, maybe calcium is. But there's no such thing as calcium or protein deficiency. Neither exists. And he knew that more than 100 years ago. So he had some connections with the Danish government. And what they decided to do is they decided to change the diet of 3 million Danes. And they stopped eating the animals. Instead, they ate the food that the animals ate, the soybeans, the grains, the potatoes. Pigs died of starvation, but people received sufficient nutrition. Nobody was hungry. They didn't suffer. You know, if you were a pig farmer, maybe you got a piece of pork every month, if you're lucky. And if you were the richest person in Copenhagen, you got a piece of beef once a year. Yeah. What happened to these Danes? Well, that was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 1920. And you can read the report. It's open access. You can look it up. And what was found was that the death rate in Denmark among 3 million Danes who became essentially vegan was reduced by 34%. It was the lowest death rate that they've had in Denmark before or after World War I. It wasn't just heart disease and strokes and cancer. It was also infectious diseases. Back in during World War I, we basically knew the sanitation efforts that we do today. You know, wearing masks and washing your hands and social distancing. They practiced that 100 years ago. In fact, they practiced it hundreds of years ago, just like we do today. They even tried vaccines back then, but anyway, what happened in Denmark, I think you should know about, and that has to do with Spanish flu. And we're always talking about how Spanish flu is a lot like the COVID infections. So it's relevant. What happened to the death in European countries, the rate of death in European countries during this time of Spanish flu? What you see there is that the people from Denmark had the lowest death rate from Spanish flu of any Western European country. All right, COVID-19 is the COMET. You've watched the movie, Don't Look Up. It's the COMET that tells people that we can make a difference. We can change. We are capable. We can do it. You know, 3 million Danes did it, and they had telegraph. They had no TV. Radio was just happening in Western Europe. What do we have today? We have 83% of the world's adult population with cell phones and iPads. We can do it. We can change the diet of 7 billion people. I know we can. But we got to get out in the streets. We got to make it real. And the results is when we went through the COVID-19 epidemic, and you can look at these studies if you want later on, and you'll see that the air cleaned up. They could see the blue sky in China, over the cities. They didn't see it before, and all of a sudden they saw, hey, we got blue sky. There were fish in the canals of Venice. Animals were running the streets. Wild animals, the ones that are supposed to be here. Anyway, just in a short period of time, we made a huge difference. But, it's really, even if everybody became vegan overnight. And by the way, there are folks out there, really, really important scientists that say, well, let's just start from the beginning. Pretty much everybody agrees that changing our energy supply to renewable energies is not enough these days. Back when we first started talking about climate change back in 1970s, at that time we could have changed to windmills and solar heating, solar energy, and we could have gotten a cap on this problem, but it's too late. I mean, Al Gore tells us that the amount of greenhouse gases that have been produced since his report in 2006 is greater than all the greenhouse gases produced by all civilizations before 2006. And it's not slowing down. It's not stopping. And even if it would, by some miracle, stop overnight, it's not enough. And a lot of people are out there saying, well, we have to change the diet of 7 billion people. That'll be enough. Well, maybe, but I don't think so. We have to do this. We have to stop the global warming gases. We've got to stop industry from burning fossil fuels. We have to do that. And we've got to change the world to a vegan diet, which I call traditional diet, like the Mayans and Aztecs and Incas and Asians. And, you got that. Don't scare them by calling them vegans. But in the meantime, and I want you to pay attention to this, I want you to go to the website. The website is mere.org. Or you can go to YouTube and you can go to an interview that I just did. We got 1,300 hits in 8 hours, which is pretty good. It's pretty good. For this particular website, it's called mere.org, MEER.org. And it's I think it's the only thing that's going to give us time. And that is a plan by Dr. Yitao to reflect the energy that's hitting us with mirrors. Yeah, we've got enough CO2 in the atmosphere to last us 10,000 years before we could get it down. So we got to do something. Well, if you can't get the CO2 down fast enough, and we got to try, this is something that we have to do long term. What we have to do is we have to lower the temperature of the planet. And this is a practical way that you can do it by reflecting the sunlight. Just take the time to listen to what they have to say. And I'm pretty certain you'll come to the same conclusion that I have, that this is a cost-effective, practical thing to do. It's going to not be easy. It'll be hard. But unless we do something drastic really quick, it's all over, folks. When we get done with my presentation, you can forget everything I had to say and go on living your happy life. But it doesn't matter. The climate doesn't care. Anyway, I presented for you what I think are the major things that threaten you and your family and what to do about it. So thank you very much for listening. I don't know whether I have any time for questions, and I certainly hope I didn't go over.
You have plenty of time, and can we have a hand for Dr. McDougall? Okay. It's interesting because we had in the chat room, those of you that are watching on the live stream, in the chat room, we actually had people saying, why does the media not cover this information? You will find as you do your research why that is. Follow the money. They say there's no money in health. There's a lot of money in health. There's gyms, there's clothing, there's food, there's all sorts of money in health. But we have a big job in front of us. And Dr. McDougall's presentation gives you the opportunity to actually gather that information so when you talk to people, you realize he's been doing this for decades. And recently I had the opportunity to interview a 53-year vegan. Light is his name, of Gentle World. He said when he wrote his first book, he could not even use the word vegan in the book. How far we have come, and sometimes we forget how far we've come. Now, we have a lot of people that have questions for Dr. McDougall. We have about 8 minutes for questions. Do we have any questions in the audience, or Bilin? Bilin is our amazing tech person. If you can give her a hand. Without her, we couldn't do what we're doing. We have the full tech team, Wade and his team. And Bilin, do we have any questions from people around the globe? We have people in India, Australia, UK, all over the world that are watching in right now. And they're watching the back of your heads. Not really. Okay, Bilin?
Well, I'm looking for questions. So if you're out there and you can hear us, please put your questions in the chat, whether you're in one of the Facebook groups or you're in Afton Tickets. I can see the chat and would love to ask your questions. But I have a question.
Okay.
When Dr. McDougall was talking about the cosmic aspect of it all, how do we get people to see that as part of the initiative that we're looking at that addresses the planet?
Okay, and if we could get Dr. McDougall back on the screen. And Dr. McDougall, did you hear the question?
Yeah, I did. This is the challenge. It's not that we don't have solutions. I've given you solutions that will work. The problem is to get people to do it. And they just don't feel threatened. It's not like I say, during the Vietnamese conflict, when I when I had to sign up for the draft and was threatened to go to Vietnam, that was a big deal. It personally touched me. I got in the streets. You know, in Denmark during World War I, you know, they were threatened with starvation and you know, other aspects of war. People don't feel threatened. You know, that's the problem, is that it hasn't gotten to the point where they can say that it's in, or has it? I don't know. Or maybe we're right on the verge. I mean, how many wildfires do you need? You know, we lost everything in October of 2017 due to the wildfires in California. Not just myself, but other family members and staff lost everything. You know, people are suffering from droughts and floods, and very shortly it's going to be food shortages. Hey, folks, you don't have to worry about people becoming vegan. They're going to become vegan, but it's not going to be by their choice. And so, I don't know, maybe you can sell it from that point of view. You know, I started out this presentation by telling you that it's the toughest sell. I could have made a lot more friends here today if I had spent my time talking to you about obesity. We know that from the interest that we get not only at our website, drmcdougall.com, but and compare that to our other website, which is mcdougallfoundation.org. You know, we see the difference. I know you're interested in things that immediately touch you, and you know, you still have the air conditioning, even though it's 113 degrees out there today. Your air conditioner still works, so it can't be a real problem, can it? You know, it's just people haven't been touched enough. So how do we do it? Well, it's going to happen. What we need to do is we need to put ourselves in a position where we're the head of the parade, so that we direct the populations in the right direction, because there are so many people out there that are doing the wrong thing and they're getting away with it. And I'll tell you who they are. They're the low carbers. They're the Atkins people. They're the people that have destroyed the health of human beings and are going to try and get in the head of the parade and destroy the health of the planet. So, ladies and gentlemen, study hard, be strong, understand your right, and get at the head of the parade, because when they look for somebody to follow, they're going to take on the low carbers until they run out of pork and beef and chickens. And they'll listen to us. But, you know, we got to start early. And if you have any better answers, you know, the idea is to make a profit. The problem with this MERE project is that we haven't figured out how to make a profit with it yet. But there's got to be somebody out there that can make $1 bazillion. These MEREs are really cheap to make. And right now they're made by using fossil fuel, which is a very good ratio as far as return goes. I mean, huge. But the plan is to be able to make MEREs out of recycled plastic and recycled aluminum cans. You just take the plastic bottles and the aluminum cans, and you got a MERE, and you supply solar energy, which they've been able to do, and you can make MEREs for nothing. But you know, you got to have 7 billion people making MEREs. But where's the profit? You know, you mentioned it. I have to tell you, I've been at this diet therapy game. I'm still at diet therapy. I've changed my patient. My patient is planet Earth. I've been at this diet therapy game, and it's just money, folks. It's just money, and power, of course, but it's money. If we could figure out a way to make this profitable, be healthy, and you know, a lot of my people have, and that's why we started the course, the Starch Solution Certification course, is that so you folks who are interested in helping people, which is the great reward, can also pay the rent. You should charge people for your courses. And you know, whether or not you use our philosophy as your main approach, it doesn't matter. I mean, to be Starch certified, the Starch Solution certification is, it gotta be of some value to you when people walk in and see the label. You know, you say, well, you know, I believe in the Starch Solution, but I'm gonna give you some vitamin pills too. Whatever.
All right. Well, we have time for one more question. Lynn?
Okay. We have a question from, let me see, the comments are moving so fast. We have a question from the audience. Nina Krosh. Is there a way to reverse Raynaud's or erythromelalgia? I've been eating an oil-free, gluten-free, low-fat, plant-based diet for 2 years, and these symptoms aren't resolving.
No. No, yeah, there have been a few stubborn problems, and Raynaud's is one of them. This is where the fingers, when you put them in a cold environment like the refrigerator, they turn whitish and blue and become painful. And I've never found a solution for that. I don't have one. And you really, I don't know how you pick the one thing that stands out that I've not been able to figure out what solves the problem. And I'm sorry, but if you'd have said rheumatoid arthritis or lupus or ankylosing spondylitis or psoriatic arthritis or alopecia or whatever, I would have directed you to the YouTube presentation I gave. And the way you find this, just put it under YouTube. You put McDougall and autoimmune diseases, and it tells you what the problem is and how to solve it. And it's animal foods, folks. It's oils and animal foods. And I know you understand the animal food part, but you got to get the oil part right, because the fat you eat is the fat you wear. And if you're having a problem with your weight and you don't understand why, it's because of that olive oil. It's because of that flaxseed oil. It's because of the other oils that you have not understood are keeping you from the health you deserve and the appearance you deserve, the health and appearance that you need to go out and solve things that are passion in your life, like the animal issue, so important. The poor animals, it's time. But they're not going to listen to you if you don't look the part.
All righty. And we have one question from our audience here, and we have about a minute left, so if you could ask your question.
I was just curious why you decided to go with the Starch Solution certificate program using the word starch when you got so much advice about that word and maybe not resonating.
Okay. I'll repeat that question. Why did you go with the Starch Solution using that word starch when you got a lot of pushback on it?
Because I'm just a mean son of a gun. I don't know. I figured I needed to slap him right across the face. It's just like with climate. Why do I push so hard? I'm trying to slap a little bit more gentle these days. And I told you I don't use the word vegan because you know how people react to that. And I would never use the word McDougall because they'd say this is just an egotistical plot. So I try and talk to people about traditional diets. The diets that your grandparents ate and their parents ate and the parents before them ate. It's the traditional diet. It's the diet of human beings. And so I guess I'm softening as I get older. I'm only 75 years old. I mean, good grief. You wait till I'm 95 and then you really will get me to be politically correct.
So let's have a hand for Dr. McDougall. Thank you so much. Okay.
Well, thanks for the invitation. It was really, really
this has been an honor.
a great
Thank you.
pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.